When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
I probably was a typical nuclear family. I mean, it was my father, mother, my sister, and I that lived in the house, but I had a half-brother who was much older than I that lived at a distance from the time I was young. My grandparents, actually my father's parents moved in with us when I was about 3. My grandmother died within a day or two of moving in, and my grandfather lived with us for about, I guess, 4 years. My other grandmother lived close by. She was within a couple miles of where we live, so we had a close-knit family in this area. In this neighborhood itself, I would say it was primarily white. When I was growing up, I think it's become a much more diverse community now. I think we have a lot of different people from different cultures in this community now. When I was younger, it was very segregated, I would say. There was one section of Old Lutherville that had primarily an African American population. Some of them lived right up the street here. Some of them lived on the other side of the railroad tracks. That's what they used to say when I was a kid. But that's changed a lot. So, as has the community. So, when I was younger, I would say we were probably middle class. I guess as I got older, I would say maybe we were upper middle class. But I think if it depended on which family, my mother's side of the family probably was more upper class, where my father's family was probably middle class or lower middle class, because they were very, blue collar. They were hard, different kind of jobs. So. My father worked for Wilson Foods, which was a meat packing company. My mother worked at Lever Brothers for a period of time, which is a big company that sells soaps. My mother's father worked for Maryland Color Printing, so he was in the printing company. I don't know exactly what his job was. My father's father, again, owned a meat packing company. My mother's mother was an only child, and she came from probably a middle-class family. Her father was a pharmacist. He had a pharmacy that, he had 2 locations. One was in Stoneleigh, and then one was down in the city. I remember my father talking about how hard it was that he's had to go to work after school to try to help the family. I remember my mother talking about many of her father's friends who were probably upper class, who lost their businesses, lost their companies. Many of them committed suicide. I think probably the sense of community. That's the one thing I love about Baltimore, whether you live in the city or whether you live out in Baltimore County like we do. I think that there's a strong sense of community, whether it be school or church. I think a big piece of it for me probably has to do with my job. Well, I guess probably because I'm a Baltimore County public school graduate. I work in Baltimore County public schools now. It's probably had a big impact on my life. How I ended up going to school at Towson to become an occupational therapist, and so I've worked in rehab and I've worked in nursing homes in the area, and then now I work in Baltimore County schools. I imagine yes, because I think, I know when I was growing up, there wasn't as big a push for mothers to work. I mean, you didn't necessarily need that. You could normally live on one income, or now you really can't. You need 2 incomes to survive. There's a lot of, and there always has been in my family, very equal distribution of other responsibilities. In our house, it's a community. For our family, it's always been about making sure that everybody was happy, healthy, and they had a roof over their heads. And I think that's pretty much what my hope would be for my kids, and I think that's probably what my hope for my parents was for us.
Tomorrow I am leaving for Baltimore. You think I